Hello everyone, and welcome again to the Prado Museum for another of our weekly sessions in English. Today we're here in the Central Gallery of the Prado, and we're going to be talking about this amazing painting by Jacques Jordaens of the subject of Atalanta and Meleager. And Jordaens was a painter from the 17th century in Antwerp. He was a student and he was an assistant of Rubens together with Anthony van Dyck. So he's one of these three big names that come out of Antwerp in this time period. And he's very influenced by Rubens. We can tell that his style is very influenced by Rubens because these figures are so robust. But Jordaens also has his own style, his own interest in other things, in some of the more maybe ordinary, more mundane experiences of daily life in Flanders in a lot of his work. But he did also paint grand mythological scenes like Rubens did, like this scene of Atalanta and Meleager. So today we're really going to talk about two different things. We're going to talk about the subject, about who are these people, who is Meleager and who is Atalanta and what they're doing here. And then we're also going to talk about the dating of this painting. So what's happening here? Well, the subject of Atalanta and Meleager comes to us, the story comes to us from Ovid's Metamorphoses. And this is such an important literary source. We've talked about it in a lot of other videos, and I'm sure that you're familiar with it, that Ovid's Metamorphoses was this important literary source that was the base of so many compositions of painters in this time period. And the story of Atalanta and Meleager is centered around a boar hunt, because the goddess Diana had sent this massive boar to the lands of Caledonia that was damaging fields, that was wreaking havoc, that was causing all of this destruction. And so Meleager, who is the son of the king of Caledonia, decides to organize a hunt to take down the boar. And Meleager was a very skilled hunter. And there was one woman that was part of this hunting group who was Atalanta. And Atalanta was a gifted athlete, and she was also a hunter herself, and so she's part of this hunting group. And she's actually the one who manages to wound the boar during the hunt. And after she wounds the boar, then Meleager is able to come in and finish the kill. And according to tradition, following tradition, the head of the hunted animal would be given to the elders of the group, to the most senior hunters who participated. But Meleager decides that he's not going to do that, because Meleager at this point in the story is rather taken with Atalanta. During all of this time, during the story that Ovid tells in his Metamorphoses, Meleager is falling in love with Atalanta. And at this point, he's rather taken with her, and he decides that he wants to give the head, that he wants to give the trophy to Atalanta. And this is very much breaking with tradition. And of course, this sparks the anger of the elders of this group. And the elders happen to be Meleager's uncles. So by doing this, Meleager is really breaking protocol. He's breaking with tradition and the established order of things. And so part of the violence that we're going to see that comes after this scene of the results of his decision might be kind of like this moralizing message of a little bit of the risk of the violence that can come of messing with the order of things, of questioning the established order of things in tradition. So Meleager decides that he's going to take the head back, because the uncles have snatched the head from Atalanta after he gives it to her, and he wants to give it back to Atalanta. And this is the moment that Jordaens has painted. Meleager decides that he is going to act violently. You can see him here as he's reaching for his sword, and ultimately he kills his uncles to give the head back to Atalanta. And if we look at Atalanta, we can see in her face, she looks like she's almost pleading with Meleager not to engage in violence, as she was lightly touching his hand, asking him maybe not to escalate into violence. But he did. Meleager killed his uncles to give the trophy back to Atalanta. Now, Meleager, when he was born, the fates had predicted that he would die when one piece of firewood was consumed. And so his mother, trying to protect him, hid this piece of firewood. But at this point, after Meleager has killed her brothers, in defense of her deceased brothers, she decides to put that piece of firewood onto the fire, and it's consumed, which is ultimately going to fulfill this prediction of the fates and end Meleager's life. Now, if we would turn our attention to the second question of when this painting was made, maybe we can look at the label for a minute to see when this painting was dated. We might see that it's painted in two different phases. It has two different dates here on the label. And then if we go back to the painting, right in the middle, we can see that there's this line that runs right up the center. Maybe you can see it. This line that runs right up the center is actually the combination of two different canvases that have been sewn together, and they were painted in two different times. This half of Atalanta and Meleager was painted around 1620, and then this other half is an addition from 1640 to 1650. And now that we've seen that line, I think visually they look quite different. We can see the different style in which Jordaens was painting in the different points in his career. Earlier in his career, he's very influenced by Rubens, and we have these sculpturesque bodies that are pronounced, that have pronounced chiaroscuro and that are so clearly modeled. And then later in his career, the anatomy looks quite different and the light is much softer. The style looks very different. A drawing was brought to light in recent years that questioned the dating of these two halves, questioned whether this was actually painted in two phases, because if that drawing were a preparatory drawing, then presumably that would put into question this entire image having been painted in two different phases. It would suggest that it was painted at once. But the senior curator of this collection, Alejandro Vergara, together with the Conservation Lab, have done extensive technical studies to study and to confirm and to reaffirm what was originally thought, that this painting was actually done in two different phases, in two different time periods, one around 1620 and the other between 1640 and 1650. So then maybe the question comes up of why an artist would come back 20 to 30 years later to enlarge a painting. Well, this is another interesting idea because it tells us maybe how Jordaens was working. He originally probably had this painting in his workshop, and perhaps a client came to him and was looking for the subject of Atalanta and Meleager, but maybe was looking for different dimensions because of where he was going to put his painting, and so he's decided to add on to it. So it's a fascinating story, and also fascinating to see how these artists are working in this time period. So thank you for joining me today, and we'll see you again next Wednesday for more sessions in English.